My name is Arthur Hale. I am 100 years old. Last month they brought a cake with 3 candles shaped like zeros and one shaped like a 1. My great-grandson asked me what it feels like to be 100. I told him the truth. It feels quiet. He thought I meant my hearing. I didn't. I meant my mind. And that quiet started the day I turned off the news. I was not always a calm man. In 1926, I grew up during hard years. I served in uniform when I was barely more than a boy. I raised children during uncertain times. I watched presidents come and go. I watched markets rise and crash. I saw men promise peace and deliver something else. Through all of it, I believed something very simple. An informed man is a responsible man. So I watched the news. Every morning at 6, every evening at 10. Newspaper on the table, radio in the kitchen, television humming in the living room. When cable arrived, I had it installed the same week. 24 hours a day of information. I thought I was being diligent. I thought I was being smart. What I was being was tense. By the time I was 72, my blood pressure was high. My sleep was shallow. I woke up at 3:17 almost every night. That number is burned into me. I would lie there staring at the ceiling, replaying headlines. War here, crisis there, economy collapsing, crime rising, disease spreading. My body didn't know the difference between something happening across an ocean and something happening in my backyard. My heart raced the same either way. My doctor adjusted my medication 3 times in 1 year. He asked about salt, he asked about exercise. He never asked what I was feeding my mind. One evening, I noticed something strange. The same story that had terrified me on Monday was replaced by a new terror on Wednesday. And by Friday, Monday's crisis was barely mentioned. I began to wonder, if the danger disappears from the screen in 3 days, was it ever a personal emergency for me? The final straw came when I was 78. There was a week when every channel talked about a looming financial disaster. Experts argued in urgent tones. Red banners scrolled across the bottom of the screen. Words like collapse and unprecedented filled the air. I sat in my armchair, gripping the remote like it was a life preserver. My wife, Margaret, came in from the garden holding tomatoes she had just picked. She looked at me and said, "Arthur, the sun is still shining." I snapped at her. I don't remember my exact words. I remember the look on her face. That night I realized something painful. The world had not changed that week. My living room had. It had become a theater of anxiety. The next morning I did something small. I unplugged the television. Not permanently, just to see what would happen. Day 1 felt strange. No morning headlines, no anchor voices narrating my coffee. The silence was uncomfortable. I reached for the remote twice before remembering it was useless. By day 3, something shifted. I noticed the birds outside my window again. I had lived in the same house for 40 years and could not have told you how many different calls echoed in the morning. By day 7, I slept through the night for the first time in years. 3:17 never came. My blood pressure dropped within a month. My doctor asked if I had changed my diet. I told him, yes, I stopped eating fear. He laughed. I didn't. Let me be clear. I did not become ignorant of the world. If something truly important happened, someone told me.
My son called, my neighbor mentioned it, the church discussed it. Real news travels through real people. What I quit was the constant drip, the repetition, the dramatization, the music behind the headlines, the panels of experts speaking in urgent tones about things none of us could personally control.
When you are 100 years old, you learn something simple. You can care without consuming. At 80, I started walking more, not because a program told me to, because I suddenly had time in the evenings. The hour that used to belong to the 10 o'clock broadcast now belonged to the sunset. I walked around the block, then 2 blocks. Then I started greeting neighbors I had barely known for decades. Herb down the street once told me, "I thought you didn't like people." I said I was just busy worrying about strangers. We laughed, but there was truth in it. The news had connected me to disasters thousands of miles away, while disconnecting me from the people 5 houses down. At 85, Margaret passed away peacefully in her sleep. That was real grief, not a headline, not a scrolling banner, real. And here is what I noticed. The quiet I had cultivated over the previous years carried me through that loss. Because my nervous system was no longer in a constant state of alarm, I had the strength to sit with sorrow without collapsing under it. Pain needs space. Anxiety fills all available space. When you live in constant alarm, even small hardships feel catastrophic. When you live in calm, even large hardships are survivable. People ask me if quitting the news made me live longer. I don't know. What I do know is that I stopped feeling like the world was ending every Tuesday. I stopped mistaking information for control. I stopped outsourcing my emotional state to producers whose job is to keep me watching. Fear is sticky. It keeps you tuned in. Peace is quiet. It doesn't sell. By 90, my doctor reduced my blood pressure medication. By 93, he removed it entirely. He asked what I was doing differently. I told him I narrowed my world to what I can love and influence. My garden, my family, my church, my street. The rest of the world still exists. I simply do not invite it into my nervous system every hour. Let me tell you what happened instead. I began reading books again, not headlines, books. Long, thoughtful, patient ideas that required attention. I wrote letters to my grandchildren, not texts, letters they still keep. I learned the names of trees in my neighborhood, maple, sycamore, elm. You would be surprised how grounding it is to know the name of something that does not panic. At 97, I started mentoring a young man from church whose father had left. We met once a week on the porch. We talked about work, about marriage, about responsibility. He once asked me how I stay so steady. I said, because I no longer let strangers decide what deserves my heartbeat. There is something I want you to understand. Your brain does not distinguish well between a tiger in your yard and a crisis on your screen. Your body releases the same stress hormones. Your pulse quickens. Your muscles tighten. In my 70s, I was fighting invisible tigers every day. Now, at 100, I fight weeds in my garden. They are real. They are manageable. They do not follow me into bed at night. When I turned 100, a local reporter asked to interview me about longevity. The irony made me smile. I told her I would answer one question. She asked, "What is your secret?" I said, "Guard your mind like it is sacred." She expected a diet, a supplement, a trick.
The secret is much less marketable. Turn down the noise. Choose depth over urgency. Choose people over pundits. Choose sunsets over scrolling banners. I am not telling you to ignore reality. I am telling you to measure its distance from your front door. If you cannot act on it today, if it does not require your hands, your vote, your voice, or your presence in a tangible way, then perhaps it does not need your constant emotional investment. At 100, my hearing is not perfect, my knees are not perfect, but my mind is steady. And that steadiness began the day I unplugged a television. The world did not fall apart when I stopped watching it. My inner world stopped falling apart. If I have years left, I will spend them as I have the last 2 decades, on my porch, in my garden, with real people, under real sky. The sun still rises without a headline announcing it. The birds still sing without a breaking news banner. Peace is available. It is just very quiet, and sometimes, to hear it, you have to turn something off.